Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a nice weekend. We've got Shaketube going on, and Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse decided this week to focus on the late play from Shakespeare's Cymbeline. And I thought, it's been a long time since I've read that play. Why don't I go back and reread it and sort of see what I find on a second reading of the play. And as I got into it, I remembered why I haven't read it in so long, reread it in so long. And that's that this play is absurd, it is strange, it is all over the place. There are plays in which you have character arcs that seem to involve some whiplash, like a character at the end of the play. Really, there's just a deep dissonance between what was going on there. Within this play, there are characters who seem to undergo that type of cognitive dissonance whiplash within the same scene, often with one person, one other character. And so it's just all over the place. It's this glorious mess. You'd be forgiven for thinking it's an early play from Shakespeare because it has sort of everything but the kitchen sink. But there is this aspect to, it's a later play, so there's a sense of confidence and perhaps it's parody that we're really experiencing when we read this play. Very briefly, and then I'll probably talk for another 20 minutes. Very briefly, there's sort of two strands that run through this play, Symboline. One deals with Symboline himself as a king and sort of this sense of kingship and nobility that Shakespeare explores in numerous plays, but also this idea of a patriotic vision for a free Britain, free from whatever hegemony is encroaching upon it. So there's that aspect to it, and we see that explored in a couple of interesting ways, I think, in this play, in a way that isn't necessarily explored in any of his other plays, that sort of subverts what, in fact, we see in his other plays, particularly something like Henry V. So that's running through as a course through the play. The other is I don't want to call it a subplot, but a major plot line of Cymbeline's daughter, Imogen, who's really his only child that is left to him in his latter years. And she is married to Posthumous, and it's a play it's a plot, I should say, that is lifted wholesale from Boccaccio's Decameron, second day, ninth story, where, and again, like truly lifted wholesale from Boccaccio's Decameron, where Posthumous has been exiled, and he's kind of frustrated, and so he's with some other guys, and he's now in Rome, Italy. It very much seems to be populated by like Renaissance Italians, not ancient Romans, and he's sort of proud. Like the one thing he can hold on to in his pride is that Imogen is faithful, and this paragon of like a faithful wife. So he's bragging about her, and Yakima, who's one of the Romans around him, says, well, I will bet I can seduce her. And so the bet is taken, and Yakima will claim to have seduced her without actually doing it. Posthumous, in his frustration, orders his servant to, murder Imogen, and then regrets the murder and ultimately is traveling back as Rome and Britain are about to go to battle. And still in love with her. And the dramatic irony that we know is that Pisanio, his Posthumous' servant, did not murder Imogen, that she is now in hiding, disguised as a page boy, and so Posthumous's grief is ironic. He does not. He should regret his feelings. He rather regrets the desire to have her murdered. And that's about it. Posthumous is a very unpleasant sort of protagonist to be hanging out with throughout this play. So those are sort of the two main plot lines. I'll talk about Imogen and Posthumous first, in part because I think Imogen is probably the most interesting character in the play. She's the only character, and I include the two sons of Cymbeline, who are young adults. I can't remember them. Arvaragus and Guidernes or something. Imogen is the most human character. She's the most interesting character. She's the only one that feels like Shakespearean in a sense. And so she has this. She is very much a paragon of faithfulness and chastity. It's interesting that it is a Roman, Yakima, who is sort of sent to soil her reputation and ruin her, when sort of there is this aspect of Imogen where she seems to uphold this like classical like Roman stoic, like faithful wife, dutiful wife. But when she is out in, let me see, yeah, when she has, there's a certain Snow White vibe where she's led out to the middle of nowhere, and Posthumus' servant, rather than murder her, takes back some token to show that he killed her, and that Posthumus will now believe she's dead. Well, Imogen has this really interesting sentence where she's reflecting on the idea of deceit, and she goes, I see a man's life is a tedious one. I have tired myself, and for 2 nights together have made the ground my bed. I should be sick, but that my resolution helps me. Milford, when from the mountaintop Pisanio showed thee, thou wast within a ken. O Jove, I think, foundations fly the wretched. Such, I mean, where they should be relived. 2 beggars told me I could not miss my way. Will poor folks lie, that have afflictions on them, knowing 'tis a punishment or trial? Yes, no wonder, when rich ones scarce tell true. To lapse in fullness is sorer than to lie for need, and falsehood is worse in kings than beggars. My dear Lord, thou art one of the false ones. Now I think on thee, my hunger's gone, but even before I was at point to sick for food. But what is this? Here is a path to it. 'Tis some savage hold. I were best not call. I dare not call, yet famine, ere clean it o'erthrow nature, makes it valiant. Plenty and peace breeds cowards. Hardness ever of hardiness is mother. Ho, who's here? If anything that's civil, speak. If savage, take or lend. Ho, no answer, then I'll enter. Best draw my sword, and if mine enemy but fear the sword, like me, he'll scarcely look on it. Such a foe, good heavens. And so there's this aspect of Imogen where she's critiquing the idea that her father Cymbeline and pretty much everyone else around her, including to a certain degree Posthumus, who is again all over the place in a mess, is deceitful, is vainglorious, is a liar. And so what on earth should she expect? How can she expect anything but that from, the common people, the peasants, the wild mountaineers, who are savage? Like, how can she expect them? What are they like if they are worse than the nobles she's been living around, who are venal and awful individuals? And so there's this aspect to Imogen that's really interesting, where she's almost the only person who sees everything that's going on and recognizes what a disaster all of this is. There's dramatic irony that is inflicted upon her at the audience, for the audience to perceive. But to a large degree, she's the one who is closest to perceiving the many ironies that encompass this play. So again, Imogen, really interesting character, someone that we all want to explore, spend time with. And that leads to this scene where she believes she's taking like a medicinal like potion, and it perhaps is secretly a poison that the queen has made, this wicked queen, this wicked stepmother queen, again Snow White vibes. And so it puts her to sleep, and it seems like death, but this is not Romeo and Juliet, so things will end a little bit better. And that brings us to a scene where the 2 mountaineers who were kind of interested in her when they thought she was a slightly younger boy, and interested almost like, there's a certain level of eroticism there. Thankfully, there's no incest. They're both very sad when they believe their new friend, Fidelis, fidelity, honesty, is dead. And so there's this beautiful song they share. Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done. Home art gone, and ta'en thy wages. Golden lads and girls all must, as chimney sweepers, come to dust. Fear no more the frown of the great, thou art past the tyrant's stroke. Care no more to clothe and eat, to thee the reed is as the oak. The sceptre learning physic must, all follow this and come to dust. Fear no more the lightning flash, nor the all-dreaded thunderstone. Fear not slander, censure rash, that was what she had, experienced. Thou hast finished joy and moan. All lovers young, all lovers must, consign to thee and come to dust. No exorciser harm thee, nor no witchcraft charm thee. Ghost unlaid forbear thee, nothing ill come near thee. Quiet consummation have, and renowned be thy grave. And so there's this beautiful song that they sing when they believe that they're burying Imogen. And then at the end, of course, we have Imogen is finally reveals who she is to Cymbeline and to Posthumus, who hits her. Just an awful guy. But ultimately, there is a reunion. Now, before that, we get this interesting bit where Posthumus, who again wanted to have Imogen murdered because she was faithless to him, is perhaps the most faithless character in this play. He goes from loving and praising Imogen to wanting her murdered, to then deeply regretting that and essentially wanting to just die in battle. And so then he gets to Britain as the Romans invade, and he's decided he will not strike down, strike a blow against Imogen's land. He's going to die valiantly for her. And so he dresses as a British peasant now, and then bravely is fighting. But the British win. Out of, insurmountable odds, the British win. And so Posthumus now redisguises himself as Roman. So he's changing sides multiple times within one day. And now he's in a jail cell, and he's going to be executed the next day, and he knows this. And this is where we get this really interesting Shakespeare ellipsis going on. So if you've read Hamlet or you're familiar with Shakespeare's famous longer sections from Hamlet, you're of course familiar with To Be or Not to Be. Not a huge number of people have also read Measure for Measure and understand that within that play, Claudio has a soliloquy that very much prefigures the To Be or Not to Be speech from Hamlet. Well, Posthumus now takes those, and he's in a jail cell like Claudio, and he sort of answers the To Be or Not to Be question. And for him, it is not to be. He would rather die. He does not want to be alive anymore. He does not want any of those things. And so Shakespeare gives us an answer to the Hamlet To Be or Not to Be through Posthumus. But he gives it through the character of a consummate loser, a guy who is just a total mess. And so there's this beautiful idea of Shakespeare answering To Be or Not to Be with not to be, but sort of making it clear that, look, if this is what this guy is saying, you and I know we should be over here. And within this absolutely crazy scene where Posthumus is in the cell and he's sort of having his Hamlet moment and saying, I don't want any of this anymore. It's all going to end, and that's all I need. We have an appearance of ghosts. Just as that song had suggested we get some ghosts. This isn't the ghost of Hamlet's father. These are the ghosts of Posthumus's various, family members, who give some interesting speeches. One of his brothers, who had died in battle, says, "When once he was mature for man, in Britain where was he that could stand up his parallel, or fruitful object be, an eye of Imogen that best could deem his dignity?" Now, Posthumus is not a very pleasant person. He's not a particularly even interesting person. He's a lout. What to me that indicates is that Posthumus's best quality is the fact that Imogen loves him. The fact that Imogen, who is this kind, intelligent, interesting human being within this play, probably the most interesting, certainly the most human being of this play, is in love with Posthumus, which means there has to be something good about him. And then after that, we get a Deus Ex Machina moment where Jupiter arrives. Mind you, this is 1st century BC or 1st century AD Britain, so pre-Christian Britain. And we get Jupiter showing up and yelling at all of the ghosts to get off the stage. And then Posthumus wakes up from this dream/nightmare, and he has that, "'Tis still a dream, or else such stuff as madmen, tongue and brain not, either both or nothing, or senseless speaking, or speaking such as sense cannot untie. Be what it is, the action of my life is like it, which I'll keep, if but for sympathy." And so we suddenly have this moment of, we had the To Be or Not to Be, and he was firmly in the not to be category. And now someone goes, well, I can't make sense of any of this, nor can we of the play, but I'll keep this. It's with my life. I'll keep it. So there's an answer to the Hamlet question, finally. And so Posthumus and Imogen are reunited at the end, and we can hope the best for them. Posthumus certainly has courage, despite a flighty mind, and this man, condemns the inconstancy in everyone else. But let's talk a little bit about Britain and what Symboline is what is happening with Britain in Symboline. So Shakespeare famously has some really like patriotic almost moments with Henry V in particular. And this play seems to subvert a lot of that. And in part because Cymbeline is an incredibly weak king. He is, there's a sense of, I'm going to talk very briefly about King Lear. There's a sense of the play King Lear where you get this idea that when King Lear was younger, he had a lot of energy, he had a lot of vigor, he was a mover and shaker, he was a man of these titanic ambitions and passions. And part of not the main tragedy, but part of the tragedy of King Lear is seeing a man who periodically can grasp his energy and vitality and like spring forth again, but ultimately doesn't have the physical ability anymore to like carry through what he once could. He can't make the demands and enforce the demands that he was once able to, from his person. Cymbeline is the opposite of young King Lear. He has no energy. He has no vision. He has almost no like he's totally colorless. He has no qualities that seem to me to be positive. Geoffrey of Monmouth in History of the Kings of Britain gives Cymbeline about less than a page. Having read Shakespeare's Cymbeline, he would merit less than a sentence. He does not get his advisors to rubber stamp his vision. He rubber stamps whatever the heck they say. He's married to his unnamed queen, who's sort of like a wicked stepmother, and is just so obviously like out for power and out to get people, and he can't see any of this. Even when told like at the end, oh, she said all these terrible things about you, he goes, oh, I can't believe, if she had told me this, I wouldn't have been able to believe it. He does not win a battle against the Romans. He's rescued by 4 guys, among whom is Posthumous, whom he exiled, and one of his former, noble advisors whom he exiled. So he's rescued by 4 guys. And then, instead of being a merciful victor, he just wants to murder all the Roman prisoners. He's terrible. And so, again, if we hark back to Imogen's speech in Act 3, she very much is condemning her father's court condemns her father's entire land to a certain degree. And so Cymbeline's quite awful. But it becomes worse when you see that because he has this do-nothing as his king in this play, Shakespeare gives the patriotic speeches to the wicked queen and to her son Cloten, who is the worst character of the play, including Yakima, the wannabe philanderer liar. So the queen gets the patriotic speech about how strong and secure Britain is in this great island, and it is Neptune's park, which is just a great little ditty there. And she talks about how the Roman ships are going to crack like eggshells, on the coast, and how secure it is. Well, historically, this is just palpable nonsense, and Shakespeare knows this, his audiences know this, so he's making fun of this idea in an astonishing way. Julius Caesar has already landed and imposed some type of authority on Britain. Claudius is going to come, in a couple of generations. Later on, Hadrian's going to build his wall. The Romans never secure all of Britain, but they certainly impose some rule upon it, and disastrous as it may be. But later on, the Angles and Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons in England, they're going to arrive and take large portions of the island over. After that, we're going to have the Battle of Hastings with William the Conqueror and the Normans, and they're going to arrive. Their ships are not cracking like eggshells on this island. But even more recently, and the fact that this cave where Imogen is hiding out and where good portions of Act 3 and 4 occur is near Milford Haven. Milford Haven is where Henry Tudor landed, later Henry VII, in his campaign to overthrow the last Plantagenet, Richard III, in 1485. And the Tudor dynasty has just ended and transferred to the Stuarts, who are related, to the Tudors. So Shakespeare is making it very clear that someone saying this is, the ships are like eggshells and this is Neptune's park is just utter nonsense. And then he's giving Milford Haven as like this massive like red flag going up. So you have this, but and this is the idea that they're going to throw off the Roman yoke. And Cloten, who's an absolutely evil and terrible individual, gets this spectacular line: "If Caesar can hide the sun from us with a blanket or put the moon in his pocket, We will pay him tribute for light. That guy's an idiot. And so Cloten really is quite awful. Cloten is the queen, the stepmother queen's son. She wants to push him kind of as an heir because the King Cymbeline's two young sons disappeared as toddlers. They're still alive. And so, hey, let's marry Imogen, Cymbeline's daughter, to the queen's son Cloten, and the dynasty continues. And everybody's happy. Well, except that Cloten is rotten. I mean, he's terrible. Now, there's an aspect, I think, and I've never found anybody with this reading of Symboline, but there's an aspect of Cloten where I think the name may come from one of the very early suras of the Quran, which is called Clots of Blood. And I'm going to read it, and I'll explain why. Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from clots of blood. Recite, your Lord is the most bountiful one, who by the pen taught man what he did not know. Indeed, man transgresses in thinking himself his own master, for to your Lord all things return. Observe the man who rebukes our servant when he prays. Think, does he follow the right guidance or enjoin true piety? Think, if he denies the truth and pays no heed, does he not realize that God observes all? No, let him desist, or we will drag him by the forelock, his lying, sinful forelock. Then let him call his helpmates. We will call the guards of hell. No, never obey him. Prostrate yourself and come nearer. And that's pretty much what happens to Cloten. Cloten runs around violently, aggressively posturing with everybody. The lords who are around him can't stand him and gossip about him in asides to the audience about what an absolute fool and loser he is. He has this whole nonsense about, he's going to hide the sun with a blanket and we'll pay him tribute for light. So he goes off in Posthumus's clothes to find Imogen so that he can murder Posthumus, rape Imogen, wearing Posthumus's clothes, and then he's going to take her back to the king and show off all this nonsense. This guy is absolutely, absolutely terrible. Thankfully, one of Symboline's sons kills him and, then sort of comes in with his head, dragging him by the forelock, comes in with his head. And so I think there's a good chance, again, I have no evidence for this, I just think there's a good chance that whole Cloten is a reference to the idea of represented in the Sura of Clots of Blood. So we have Cloten. Cloten's terrible. And ultimately, Symboline's, spirited away sons are revealed to be the two young men who helped defend him, and the old man with them who raised them was his advisor that he'd exiled. And so we have this happy King Lear where everybody survives, except Cloten. Everybody survives, and we have a reunion of the beloved daughter with her husband, and we have some sense of hope, hoping, of course, that Symboline will not be on the throne for much longer because he's such a bum. And so there's this very subversive idea of Britain, at least in my reading. A couple of quick other notes now. I'm sure I'm going on for way too long. Posthumous, there's a certain element of Posthumous that makes me wonder if Shakespeare takes the name not just for what it symbolizes, the fact that he was born as an orphan because his father had predeceased him and his mother died in childbirth, but that it really is a reference to Augustus's grandson / stepson, Agrippa Posthumus, who, Augustus famously had some real issues with his daughter Julia, kind of like Cymbeline and Imogen. This play is set during the reign of Augustus, and Posthumus would have been sort of Augustus's sort of last male heir. He had also been exiled and was murdered upon the accession of Tiberius. And part of that is that Posthumus in Cymbeline has two older brothers who have died. So did Agrippa Posthumus. And Posthumus was probably exiled because of some various slanders and things like that. And Posthumus, again, sort of is exiled and forced out by a queen stepmother. Augustus was married to Livy, who was very intent on seeing her son, either Tiberius or Drusus, accede to the throne. So there just possibly is a reference there. Yakima, who has probably the craziest whiplash scene throughout the entire play, in Act 1, where he goes and he's going to seduce Imogen, and so he goes off some nonsense about apes and creatures and all sorts of it cannot be of the eye, for apes and monkeys, twixt two such sheaves, would chatter this way, and contemn with mows the other. Nor the judgment, for idiots in this case of favor would be wisely definite, nor the appetite sluttery to such neat excellence oppose, should make desire vomit emptiness, not so allured to freed. What the heck? I mean, this guy's just a mess. Yakima is quite awful. Clots is the only one who makes Yakima look good throughout this play. Yakima, when he, in order to seduce Imogen, is, again, this is all a story that's within Boccaccio's Decameron. Yakima has himself hidden in a trunk because he slanders Posthumus and says, oh, he's been cheating on you. You should get revenge on him by sleeping with me. And she goes, absolutely not. And he goes, oh, I was just testing you. I knew you were faithful. You know, I was just testing you. I mean, he's just zigzagging. I've got this trunk of valuables. I trust you. Can I leave it in your bedchamber? Sure. Stay away from Yakima. This guy's terrible. So he hides himself in the trunk. He gets out. He looks around and sees the decorations in the room. He steals jewelry off of Imogen's arm. He looks at her as she's lying nude to look for birthmarks that he can brag to Posthumus about. And there's two explicit comparisons in there. One is to Sextus Tarquin, who's mentioned in Livy's Early History of Rome, and he is sort of the reason that the early Roman kingdom became a Roman republic, because he raped Lucretia famously, and the Romans rose up in rebellion against the Tarquin king and threw the family out. So again, Shakespeare making an explicit connection to a notorious rapist in literature. And then there's also a reference to Tereus and Philomela in Ovid's Metamorphoses, which appears to be the book that Imogen might be reading. And Tereus, again, is an even more vile, to my mind, depiction of a rapist. I shouldn't say a rapist in classical literature, where he assaults his sister-in-law, and then to prevent her from telling one, has her tongue cut out. And ultimately he gets a comeuppance. So Shakespeare makes an explicit connection to this guy about how terrible he is in two ways. And then at the end, you would think, Clots has to die, but you'd think Yakima probably has to go as well, but Yakima's forgiven. And anyways, the whole rebellion we were going to do against Rome, we're not actually rebelling against Rome. So Shakespeare ends this play sort of back where we started, with almost every character we had at the beginning. And it's sublime and crazy. So this was Symboline. And this discussion was probably all over the place, just like the play. Hope you have a great weekend. Thanks.